In archival bundle number 1181, from the fonds of the Sacred Office of the Roman Curia, there is a sheet of thick paper, without the secretary's registration signature and without notarial certification. On the reverse side of this document, dated February 26, 1616, a record notes that the commissary of the Inquisition, Michelangelo Segizzi, in the presence of Cardinal Roberto Bellarmino, imposed a personal judicial prohibition on the Florentine mathematician Galileo Galilei, not to hold, defend, or in any way teach the heliocentric doctrine of Copernicus. The absence of witness and notary signatures makes this sheet the principal legal flaw in one of the most sensational trials of the 17th century. 17 years later, in 1633, it was this dubious clerical draft that served as the formal basis for accusing the elderly scientist of grave disobedience to church authorities and suspicion of heresy. Before moving to a detailed analysis of the investigative dossier and the hidden mechanisms of the Inquisition tribunal, I ask you to subscribe to the channel and support the release of new investigations based strictly on archival primary sources and documents of the era. To understand the genuine causes of the 1633 trial, it is necessary to abandon simplified myths and reconstruct the institutional environment of the Roman Curia in the early 1630s. The Papal State was in a state of severe geopolitical crisis during this period. The 30 Years' War of 1618–1648 was unfolding in Europe. The Pontiff, Urban VIII, in the world Maffeo Barberini, elected in the conclave of 1623, was conducting a risky diplomatic game, attempting to weaken the dominance of the Spanish and Austrian Habsburgs through covert support for France and its first minister, Cardinal Richelieu. Funding papal armed forces and constructing fortifications were draining the budget of the Holy See, and within the College of Cardinals, the confrontation between the pro-Habsburg and pro-French factions was rapidly intensifying. On March 8, 1632, at a meeting of the secret consistory in the Vatican, a major scandal erupted. Cardinal Gaspar de Borja y Velasco, officially representing the interests of the Madrid court, publicly accused Pope Urban VIII of criminal indulgence towards Protestants and betrayal of the Catholic world due to Rome's ties with Paris and the King of Sweden, Gustavus II Adolphus. The Spanish faction openly threatened to convene an ecumenical council to depose the pontiff. For Urban VIII, a critical situation had developed. He needed to immediately and uncompromisingly prove to the College of Cardinals his own theological impeccability and determination to eradicate the slightest deviations from canonical orthodoxy. Simultaneously within the Curia, interdepartmental rivalry between two influential structures intensified. The Society of Jesus and the Circle of Tuscan Intellectuals at the court of Grand Duke Ferdinando II de' Medici. The mathematicians of the Roman College of Jesuits, primarily Christoph Scheiner and Orazio Grassi, had been engaged in a long-standing polemic with Galileo concerning the nature of sunspots and the trajectories of comets. Public polemical defeats and the caustically satirical tone of Galileo's treatises had turned the leadership of the Society of Jesus into an irreconcilable bureaucratic opponent of the Florentine. As the principal philosopher and mathematician to the Grand Duke of Tuscany, Galileo relied on the diplomatic status of the House of Medici, transforming any private discussions into matters of prestige for two sovereign states. A key element in protecting the interests of the Florentine circle was the Accademia dei Lincei, founded by Prince Federico Chesi in 1603. This association was a closed network of intellectuals, diplomats, and prelates who used a complex system of mutual protection. Its members included Maffeo Barberini himself, before his election to the papal throne, as well as his personal secretary, Giovanni Ciampoli. The network of Chesi and Ciampoli long formed a reliable shield around Galileo. However, in 1630, Prince Chesi died, after which the financial and administrative infrastructure of the Academy collapsed, leaving the Tuscan group without a key coordinating center in Rome. The history of the creation of the treatise, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, became a model of the most complex bureaucratic maneuvering. In 1624, during 6 audiences with the newly elected Pope Urban VIII, Galileo secured oral permission to consider the cosmological hypotheses of Copernicus and Ptolemy, provided he strictly adhered to a neutral, purely mathematical approach. The pontiff personally put forward an inviolable theological condition. The text must include the thesis of divine omnipotence. According to this argument, God could have arranged the physical universe in an infinite number of ways inaccessible to human reason, and therefore no astronomical model could be considered a reflection of objective reality. The procedure for obtaining the censorship approval, imprimatur, stretched over 2 years. From 1630 to 1632, the manuscript moved between censors in Rome and Florence. The Pope's secretary, Giovanni Ciampoli, pressured the master of the Sacred Palace, Niccolò Riccardi, who was responsible for papal censorship, assuring him of the pontiff's favor towards the work. An outbreak of plague in Tuscany in 1630 disrupted logistics. Quarantine cordons blocked the regular delivery of the complete manuscript to Rome. A compromise administrative decision was made to divide the censorial powers. The Florentine inquisitor Clemente Egidi and the monk Giacinto Stefani approved the main body of the text, while Riccardi in Rome demanded that the work be supplemented with a preface and the pontiff's concluding argument. Galileo formally complied with these demands, but radically shifted the semantic emphasis. The preface was printed in a different font and read like a forced bureaucratic courtesy, while the character of Simplicio, embodying dogmatic scholasticism, voiced Urban VIII's argument at the book's conclusion in a form that Rome perceived as an open and caustic mockery of the head of the Church. In February 1632, the book was published by the Florentine printing house of Giovanni Battista Landini, with a print run of about 1,000 copies. The first copies were delivered to Rome via diplomatic mail in the baggage of the Tuscan embassy, bypassing the general customs. In August 1632, a special commission headed by the Pope's nephew, Cardinal Francesco Barberini, conducted an expert analysis of the text. The commission's conclusion stated, "The author had gone beyond the hypothesis and was directly defending the physical truth of Copernicanism, which had been condemned by a decree of the Congregation of the Index on March 5, 1616. Pope Urban VIII perceived the publication as a personal political blow and a betrayal by his longtime protégé. Secretary Giovanni Ciampoli was immediately exiled to the province of San Severino, without the right to visit Rome, and the master of the palace, Niccolò Riccardi, fell into deep disgrace. In September 1632, the Inquisition issued a decree ordering the 68-year-old Galileo to immediately come to Rome for questioning. The Tuscan ambassador, Francesco Niccolini, tried to use all his diplomatic connections to have the summons revoked. In his dispatches to the First Minister of Tuscany, Andrea Cioli, the ambassador reported on the pontiff's extreme irritation, who claimed that the Florentines' work had caused colossal damage to the Catholic faith. Attempts to present medical reports from Florentine doctors about the defendant's serious health condition, who suffered from a hernia and cataracts, were blocked by the tribunal. Rome warned that if he refused, the scientist would be brought under escort in chains. On January 20, 1633, Galileo set out on his journey in the Grand Duke's palanquin, and after a 3-week sanitary quarantine, arrived in Rome on February 13, 1633. He was accommodated in the building of the Tuscan embassy at the Villa Medici. Housing a suspect on the grounds of a foreign diplomatic mission instead of in the cells of the Inquisition prison was an exceptional privilege, granted due to the status of Duke Ferdinando II. However, the villa was under constant surveillance by agents of the Holy Office, and the envoy, Niccolini, was forbidden from disclosing any procedural information. The court sessions began on April 12, 1633, in the Palace of the Holy Office. The investigation was led by the tribunal's Commissary General, the Dominican Vincenzo Maculano da Firenzuola, with the participation of the fiscal prosecutor Carlo Sinceri. The investigation was conducted according to canonical norms, as recorded in the manuals of Nicolau Emmerich and Francisco Peña. During the first interrogation, Maculano hoped to secure an immediate admission of violation of the direct prohibition of 1616. However, Galileo presented the investigators with an authentic document, a written certificate issued and signed by Cardinal Roberto Bellarmino on May 26, 1616. Bellarmino's certificate stated, in black and white, Signor Galileo had not been subjected to a judicial abjuration. He had merely been informed of the general decision of the Congregation of the Index that Copernicus's views contradicted Scripture and could not be held or defended. The cardinal's autograph lacked the formulation, not to teach in any way, quovis modo non docere, which was the foundation of the prosecution's position. An insurmountable legal dissonance arose. The tribunal's materials contained an anonymous protocol from February 26, 1616, with a total prohibition, while the suspect possessed a certified document from a high-ranking curial official that refuted the fact of a personal judicial order. A critique of the sources reveals the mechanism of this clerical fabrication. An analysis of case number 1181 proves that the protocol of February 26, 1616, had no legal force. It was a draft injunction prepared by Commissary Segizzi in case the scientist refused to comply with Bellarmino's warning. Since Galileo had expressed complete obedience in 1616, the official proclamation of the prohibition in the presence of a notary did not take place. The sheet remained in the archive, and in 1632, the investigation attached this unsigned draft to the case as incontrovertible evidence, deliberately ignoring the absence of a notarial act. The emergence of Bellarmino's certificate shattered the tribunal's initial plan. Further public proceedings threatened to institutionally discredit the Holy Office. Galileo was kept with the tribunal, placed in the apartments of the fiscal prosecutor, with permission to use the services of a servant. From April 12th to 30th, 1633, a covert procedure of extrajudicial settlement took place. On April 22, 1633, Commissary Maculano sent a secret report to Cardinal Francesco Barberini, proposing to persuade the accused to make a sincere confession in a private conversation in exchange for the abandonment of criminal sanctions. Maculano conducted hours of negotiations with Galileo face to face. The Inquisitor made it clear, persistence would lead to a formal investigation on charges of strong suspicion of heresy, interrogation under the threat of torture, and life imprisonment in dungeons, whereas an admission of error framed as authorial vanity would allow the case to be concluded with mild ecclesiastical penance. The physically exhausted 69-year-old scientist accepted the terms of the compromise. On April 30, 1633, during the second official interrogation, Galileo gave his testimony according to a prearranged script. He stated that he had reread his work and acknowledged that the arguments in favor of the Copernican system were presented with excessive persuasive force. He explained this as a human weakness and a desire to flaunt his erudition, but denied any conscious intention to challenge the Church's decisions. On May 10, 1633, during the third session, the defendant submitted a written plea for mercy, citing his old age, illnesses, and 17 years of impeccable fidelity to the faith, after which he was returned to the Medici villa. However, the reached agreement was annulled by Pope Urban VIII. On June 16, 1633, a final decision was made at a closed congregation of the Holy Office, presided over by the pontiff, to interrogate Galileo about his true intentions under the formal threat of torture, to compel him to make a public abjuration before the full court, to sentence him to indefinite imprisonment at the discretion of the Holy See, and to impose a total ban on the dissemination of the dialogue. On June 21, 1633, the fourth interrogation was conducted using the protocol of rigorosum examen, strict inquiry. The commissioner demanded a confession of his inner convictions. Galileo categorically stated that after the decree of 1616, he had never held Copernican views, and considered the Ptolemaic system the only true one. The inquisitor pointed out the inconsistency of these words with the text of his book, and warned of the application of physical measures. Galileo replied, "I am here to obey. I did not hold this opinion after the decision was made." The interrogation concluded with the scientist's personal signature. The threat of physical suppression took the form of first-degree legal pressure, territio verbalis, required by canonical law regulations to complete the case's qualification. On June 22, 1633, the sentencing was announced at the monastery of Santa Maria sopra Minerva in Rome. Galileo, dressed in a penitential shirt, was forced to kneel before the College of Judges. Only 7 of the 10 cardinal inquisitors signed the verdict. 3 judges, Cardinal Gasparo Borgia, Laudivio Zacchia, and the pontiff's nephew, Francesco Barberini, refused to sign the sentence, demonstrating a deep rift within the Curia regarding the legitimacy of the conviction. The tribunal declared the defendant vehemently suspected of heresy. Kneeling before the text of the Holy Scriptures, Galileo read aloud the dictated formula of abjuration, cursed his former errors, and swore an oath to report to the Inquisition all adherents of heliocentrism. The popular phrase, "and yet it moves," eppur si muove, is a later fabrication that appeared in print only in 1757 in Giuseppe Baretti's work, The Italian Library. These words are absent from the trial transcripts and diplomatic correspondence. Such a statement during the session would have immediately led to the defendant being classified as an unrepentant heretic and handed over to the secular authorities for execution by burning. The prison sentence was commuted by the Pope to indefinite house arrest. From June 23 to December 1633, Galileo was held at the residence of Archbishop Ascanio Piccolomini in Siena, who ensured his maximum comfort. In December 1633, the Inquisition transferred the scientist to his villa, Il Gioiello, in Arcetri, near Florence. The conditions of his confinement were monitored by the local tribunal. Travel outside the estate and scientific discussions with visitors were strictly forbidden, and the reading of the 7 penitential psalms, with the court's consent, was undertaken by his daughter, the nun Maria Celeste. Requests for trips to Florence to see doctors were denied until 1638, when the scientist completely lost his eyesight. The Congregation of the Index conducted an operation to confiscate and seize the print run of the dialogue across Italy. Copies of the text of the sentence and the abjuration were sent to the apostolic nuncios and universities in Bologna, Padua, Paris, and Madrid for public reading to professors of astronomy, which had a powerful deterrent effect on the academic community. René Descartes, in Holland, having received news of the trial at the end of 1633, hastily halted the publication of his fundamental treatise, The World, or Treatise on Light, fearing similar charges. Despite the surveillance, Galileo, with the assistance of his disciples Vincenzo Viviani and Evangelista Torricelli, managed to complete his major work on mechanics. Discourses and mathematical demonstrations relating to 2 new sciences. The manuscript was smuggled out through the diplomatic channels of the French envoy and printed in 1638 in Leiden by the Elsevier publishing house. The archival dossier of the Inquisition trial, volume 1181, remained classified in Rome for almost 2 centuries. In 1810, by order of Napoleon I, the archive of the Holy Office was transported to Paris as part of a convoy of 3,236 carts to form a pan-European imperial archive. It was not until 1843 that the French government agreed to return the original investigative case file to Rome, and, in 1845, the manuscript was finally returned to the Vatican. The full text of the protocols, without censorial deletions, was published by the historian Antonio Favaro in the monumental national edition of Galileo's works between 1890 and 1909. A legal conclusion to the case was reached on October 31, 1992, when a special commission of Pope John Paul II, led by Cardinal Paul Poupard, announced the results of the review of the trial. The Roman Curia officially recognized the 1633 tribunal's decision as a judicial and theological error, resulting from the disregard of its own procedural norms and the pressure of political circumstances. The Inquisition trial of Galileo has gone down in history as a vivid example of using judicial bureaucracy and falsified archival records to achieve the short-term political goals of the ruling elite.